Hello and welcome to this episode of Legal and Regulatory Committee on our LinkedIn Live. Today we're talking about the fundamentals of starting a company. And we have some special guests here. For starters, our host is Patty with Saul Ewing. And our guests are David Weinstein for Archer and Greiner and Jorge Horchata. Did I say that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Soto for our content creation. So take us away, Patty.
Welcome everyone. So happy to have everyone here. So my name is Patty, and I am an attorney at Saul Ewing LLP. I mainly do corporate work, a lot of M&A, and lately been doing a lot of commercial contracting and intellectual property for some esports organizations as well. And today we have, as Megan mentioned, we have Jorge. And Jorge, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and your current occupation, that'd be great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So my name is Jorge Soto, and I am a full-time content creator, mainly on YouTube. And I've been doing this for the past 4 years. I started during quarantine, quarantine boredom, and then just took off. And now I'm doing this full-time. I'm based in the Providence, Rhode Island area. And my content mainly consists of comedy skits and story times. And it really appeals to a young audience. And I love doing it. I love every moment of it.
That's great to hear. And David, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Patty. David Weinstein. I'm a partner at Archer and Greiner. We're a full-service law firm based in the Philadelphia metropolitan area with offices up into New York and down to Houston, Texas. And I run a large portion of our sports and entertainment practice. I work with several esports teams and esport providers, and over the years have really enjoyed working in this space. On the side, if you just want to know, my main practice is actually in energy and utility, which is a kind of an interesting intersection. We can talk about that some other time. So anyway, I thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate the ESTA for hosting this. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, and thank you, Megan, for introducing us as well. So today we'll be talking about the fundamentals of starting your own company, and we have a great panelist today. We have Jorge, who is an entrepreneur and started his own company, and we obviously have David with us, who will help us and guide us and kind of letting us know that the legal behind starting a company. So let's start with you, David. Can you explain to us a different type of business structures? I know we oftentimes hear that, we want to start a business and people tend to form LLCs instead of corporations, but is there something more there than just LLC and corporations?
Yeah, and thank you, Pat. Great question. So there are multiple types of entities that you can create. And matter of fact, you don't have to create an entity. There's this concept of sole proprietorship, which means you don't really have an entity. It's you working on behalf of yourself with no actual what we call legal protections or legal umbrella above that. The reasons you typically want to try to avoid that if you can is because the entities, whether it's an LLC, an S Corp, even a limited partnership or a C Corp, tend to then protect individuals from liability. It's really a liability purpose because those entities under state and federal law are recognized at least as independent entities for liability purposes, maybe not for tax, but for liability purposes. And very quickly, the two biggest ones you see are people who typically, unless you're going and wanting to be a publicly traded company at some point in time where you become a C Corp, you would either become an LLC or an S Corp. Those two entities essentially for tax purposes allow everything to flow up and be taxed just at the individual level instead of once at the corporate level. And the main big difference from a tax perspective when you're looking at an LLC versus an S Corp is that as an S Corp, as an owner, you're actually able to pay yourself a salary, whereas in an LLC, you can't. So there are some legal ramifications for each one of them. But each person should really, when they're thinking about these things, consult with an attorney and a tax advisor because there's no one size fits all that's perfect for anyone, but there's definitely something that will fit you.
No, that's great to hear. And Jorge, you said during COVID. So do you currently own an entity? Do you have an LLC or corporation?
Yeah, so I was advised when I was doing my content journey, a lot of content creators, and I was fortunate enough to have a tax advisor tell me that an LLC was the best option for me at the time. And that's what I'm still doing. And it has been very beneficial in terms on the business side of things. and as well as what David mentioned, certain tax reasons as well. So it just all really made sense for me. And yeah, you just learn all of those things as you slowly grow your business and progress into making this a full-time career.
No, that's great to hear. And as David mentioned, you always want to consult an attorney and a tax advisor. And I heard you say you consulted with the tax advisor, Jorge. Did you also consult with an attorney?
If I'm being honest, I really didn't consult with an attorney. I feel like every day's a school day where you start learning certain things and they tell you, hey, you should have done this and doing this better. So yeah, I feel like now where I am fortunate enough to have an area where I really can't consult with attorneys now. I am getting assistance from them, which is great. But yeah, I am just learning little by little still the little nooks and crannies in the business.
Yeah,
I
no.
couldn't agree more with Jorge. Like our attorneys, I'll speak for it since Patty and David are both attorneys. I think they call them counselors because they really do. They counsel us.
Yeah.
You want them on your advisory board. You want them you want to grow your relationship with your attorney. Make it enjoyable, just like your accountant. It's just such an important relationship to get things filed properly out of the gate and seeking their wisdom. That's what they're here for. They're our partners.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree, Megan. I think that's an excellent point you make. And I think that's one of the difficulties when starting a business, you kind of get scared of attorneys and who to trust and who do you go to.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, But David, so going back to starting an entity, what are some critical legal steps in officially registering a new company? I know oftentimes people just want to start a company and get an EIN is oftentimes what they hear from their tech advisors. But are there other steps that they need to be taking?
Yeah, there really are. And I mean, so it's kind of really good segue here because tax advisors are really good at making sure a lot of entity formation steps are taken in the right structures for you from a tax perspective. But they're not always thinking about the other pieces that kind of go with that. They'll get you your EIN so you can file your tax returns, you can have employees, all the things that you need to go with that. But you should also be thinking about the fact that there's several other things. When you're picking a name, for instance, whether or not that entity name has already been utilized by somebody else in the marketplace. And depending upon what you want to do with it, you may be later finding yourself in a position where you've built up a lot of intellectual property in the name and somebody else has been using it, maybe on the West Coast and you're an East Coast kid or vice versa. And you don't realize that as you expand into their territory, you're now putting yourself in a disadvantage because you're going to lose the intellectual property potentially or be in a battle and paying off somebody potentially to try to continue to use that name. The other thing that you have to think about, and this is a newer regulation that's come out on all new formations, and it'll actually capture all entities that were formed prior to 2024 as well, is the new FinCEN rules, where there's the Corporate Transparency Act that was passed by Congress. And those requirements require you to record what's called your beneficial ownership interests in the companies. Almost all small businesses will be captured by this just because of the exceptions are very difficult for them to actually get away from the filing requirements. But you should consult typically with an attorney or somebody who does these filings for you to see if you actually do meet an exemption. But if you don't, you need to file with the federal government. And if you don't file with FinCEN, you're subject to over $500 a day, not just for the company, but for the individuals within the company. So it's really important that you make these determinations and these assessments early on as you're going through. So you don't end up in a position where you end up with a large liability that you just didn't know about or didn't even think could happen to you. And these are the little pitfalls that can happen if you don't really talk to a professional about these things.
Yeah, no, David, I think you make an excellent point. I think oftentimes we don't think about, the name that we're using online and advertising ourselves with and whether there are any legal implications with that. And to that point, Jorge, I know you piggyback off of David. I know you mentioned you talked to a tech advisor. So how did you decide, first of all, what is your business name, right? And how did you decide on that name? And did you take any steps necessary, as David has mentioned, to ensure that, your name is legally protected?
Yeah, so definitely. So my business name is Horchata Soto LLC. Horchata Soto is the name of my channels and just of my overall brand. Long story short, horchata is just the Spanish drink that everyone knows and loves. It was my nickname in middle school. And when I was making my own social media accounts, I just labeled it as Horchata Soto, really didn't think much about it. And as I was progressing with the followers and the views, when I would get recognized in public, people didn't know me as my first name, Jorge. They knew me as Horchata Soto, which was amazing. It was a lot of fun. So I just made that my overall brand. And when it was time to just make it a business and ensure that I had full, let's say, control and ownership of it, I did go to my tax advisor, and I think he just looked into it, making sure that no one else had that name, and which is a very rare name, but you just never know. So fortunately, nobody had it, and I have the domain names as well for my websites, and yeah, just making sure that everything is just still structured and that I still have complete control over it and just that name.
And going on with that, one of the things that I do recommend people before they even put the name out into public, reserve your domain names beforehand, because once somebody sees the filing, especially if it's a unique filing, they'll go and cyber squat it, and then you got to take it away from them. It's expensive, and you want to try to avoid that if you can, because if you, especially unique names, because they'll immediately grab it trying to get you to pay them for it. So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And a little unrelated, Jorge. So you said Horchata was your middle name, was your nickname in middle school.
Yeah.
How did that come about? It just, off topic a little.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it was my nickname because I would just always bring it to school for some reason. Like, I don't know, people would always bring certain snacks and stuff. For some reason, I would just always bring the drink, or I would always I had group chats with friends at the time where I would just take pictures of anytime I drink or try to just send it to the group chat for no reason. So they just started nicknaming me that because, oh, he just loves the drink so much. So it was just a funny little accident.
No, that's pretty funny and pretty interesting to hear how names come about. So thank you for that. So David, I have a question about nonprofits here. I know Esports Trade Association, for example, is a nonprofit organization, and different esports organizations, primary goal is to promote esports education, community development, or charitable activities. Do you recommend they structure their entity as a 501c3 nonprofit?
So the answer to that is a little bit complicated. It really depends upon what you're trying to do as well. I mean, not every entity has to be a C3 in order to be supportive to the community. You could just be a state law nonprofit and not actually go through the process of filing for this federal C3 certification. But if you decide to go through that process, it's usually a decision making as to your educational purpose or some other charitable purpose. Or you're going to, and the expense, because there's a 990 that has to be filed. Excuse me. You have to file annual 990s, but there's an initial filing that has to be made with the IRS, and they have to approve your tax exempt status as part of that. So, so a lot of times what you end up doing is going and maybe starting off as a state chartered nonprofit corporation, and then over time, within a year or so, then make that filing later, because you don't know right up front, and it's expense, and you may not want to spend it right up front. You may want to see where you end up a little bit. So it is a little bit harder though to convert an LLC or something else into a nonprofit later. That actually is difficult to do. But if you start off as a state law nonprofit entity, you can always file for your 501c3 exemption. And there's other exemptions, by the way. There's C6, there's C4s, there's C5s. There's a whole bunch of other exemptions. Not all of them actually work for this particular space, but C3 is what most people think of.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's extremely helpful. And piggybacking off of that, Jorge, I know you've heard David talk a lot about, the 501c3, the different entity structures, the Corporate Transparency Act. And I'm curious to know, at what stage did you consult with your accountant and your attorney? And, how did that benefit you, if at all?
Yeah, definitely. So I consulted with my tax advisor. It was once like a full year after doing it full time, when it was filing season. That's where I was I think I need to go to someone who can really help me out here, because obviously I wasn't going to do it myself either, but just finding the right person. It did take a while. I was just asking around, because I feel like content creation is a very, very new career, very, very new job, and a very new business, where I just had to find the right person. I had a lot of friends as well at the time advising me in certain ways that make sure your tax advisor knows this, or that they can help you out with this because my person knows this. And also, unfortunately, a lot of my friends aren't in my state. So Rhode Island is like the smallest state in the country. So it's very rare to find people doing the similar things as me. But I had friends in Pennsylvania, California, Florida. They were just telling me, hey, just find someone along these lines. So that was answering your question. That was just one full year after. That's where I just felt, okay, I just need to be advised and just make sure that I'm doing the right things here and just kind of building that strong relationship. I've been working with him for 3 years now. So just building that strong relationship with them to really understand what I'm doing and how we can really, benefit, how he can benefit me, and how we can benefit each other.
No, that's great to hear. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, and the one thing which I think people need to understand is as they grow, their needs increase, and you should really get a good feel for the person you're working with, because you can outgrow the person, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. They understand that, and you should ask them, or when you get to certain sizes and you start having so many employees or other things that happen underneath you, you got to really think about, is this particular company I'm working with the right size for for what I'm doing in my operations? Always start with somebody you're comfortable with, but just don't be afraid to think that way as you go forward. Loyalty also can be returned to those people by the other people you meet who are of the right size for them to work with as well. So don't feel loyal to somebody or that you're disloyal by moving on. Be loyal to them by saying they did a good job for you and they can do a good job for somebody else. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, David, and that kind of segues onto our next section of financing your business. As you mentioned, Jorge, you started out during COVID very small, and after a year, you realized this kind of blew out of proportion, and I need some help, right? And so, David, my question to you is, what are some funding sources when it comes to starting a company, right? I am assuming Jorge had some personal savings he had to use, maybe some loans. But we hear from some companies using investors as well. So if you could give us a general overview of that, that'd be helpful.
Sure. There's a lot of different things. So obviously there's the personal savings that people will invest. They might take their own home equity to start a company. They may actually go to a friends and family round of what we would call investor or seed money, right? Those are all very common first steps that almost everybody will go about, because borrowing money from a lender, from a traditional bank, is very expensive and is full of a lot of restrictions and other things that you're not quite ready to deal with. It adds a layer of compliance that you just may not be ready to actually handle internally. And borrowing money from investors, there's all sorts of different types of investors for different sizes. There's angel investors. There's people that are out there as other portions of capital investment, all the way up through the capital markets, depending on how big you are. And you just really got to think through, is this the right size for me? I would always recommend anyone who's starting small, think big, but reach small. Don't, because the overreach will end up putting you in a harder place than the underreach. The underreach you can always go back to again, but think big the entire time. Know where you want to go, but understand there's small steps you need to take to get there. So most of the people who are founders are starting off small. They usually, the first round is a friends and family round, Patty. And you probably are very familiar with that as well. And it's usually something where there's a negotiated transaction, and the valuation of the company, everything else really isn't coming much into effect. They're saying, oh, I believe in you, Jorge, and I believe in what you're doing. I'm not really worried about what my rate of return is going to be on this, but here's $10,000, or whatever it is that you're asking for. And it's that type of thing with the hope that they're helping you, and maybe they'll get some money back on the other side that'll really, benefit them as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I recently read somewhere that Jeff Bezos actually did a friends and family. I think he had his siblings kind of invest in Amazon, and now their shares are worth quite a lot. So lucky them. But to your point, David, can you explain the importance of having clear agreements in place with these investors? What are some common legal pitfalls that you've seen that entrepreneurs should avoid?
So, first off, I will say the most important thing is having a written document. If there's ever a point in time where you should always have a legal advisor who is familiar with lending and borrowing and with investors and with M&A transactions, it's at the time where you take money from somebody else, especially somebody unrelated, but believe it or not, even related is probably sometimes just as important. And having that well documented on how much they're giving you, what they're receiving in return, and making sure that your operating documents, whatever they are, usually an LLC is called an operating agreement behind them, typically, that they're clear as to the rights of everybody, because where most issues happen is over money. And it's only, people kind of joke it's only money. It is. It's not life or death, but right behind life and death is money for most people. So make sure that you're documenting the money properly, because one thing is you as the operator and the founder want to make sure that you're doing things right, but the investor just wants to know, hey, we're going to let you run, but what happens when I want to get out? What happens if you start making more money? What happens if you want to bring in more people? I just want to know that up front, so I know how my money will work for me and working for you at the same time. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think oftentimes people don't really think that, sometimes money and or business and family don't really mix together, and without a clear agreement of where your responsibilities and your rights stand, then it gets a little murky in there. And to that point, Jorge, so what were your initial funding sources, right? When you first started, did you take out a loan? Did you have investors? Go ahead and walk us through that.
Yeah. So when I first started, I was fortunate enough where I guess the return on my business side of things, I didn't have to invest too much money to start off with. I always just felt as I always said to myself personally, like, I don't want to have any excuses. I don't have to buy the most expensive camera in the world. I didn't have to buy like these crazy things, to really start my production and my dream of just being a full-time content creator. At the time, I was just working at Walmart part-time, where I was making probably $150 to $300 a week, and I would just use that money to kind of fund certain things that I want to do. But yeah, I just started off with the phone I already had, which wasn't, it was just an Android that just didn't look the best. And I just had a little camcorder, and I would just use those things. And as time progressed, you start seeing money come in. And then I just felt, okay, let me just slowly start investing, But fortunately, my expenses with my business really aren't the craziest. I don't have to take out a loan. I don't have to take out certain things. And I now have gotten to the point financially where if I do want to go into more expensive endeavors, let's say like invest certain like merchandising or certain things like that, I fortunately do have that money saved up where I can invest in myself. I just think that was the beauty of the business, where you can just start really, really small with practically nothing, and then you can really make it a full-time career. That was just always my thing. I just didn't want to have any excuses or any things along those lines. And I was going to mention one more thing as well along that. Yeah, just pretty much just working little by little. And that's the beauty of this business that I love.
I'm curious, when you were getting sponsors for your brand as a creator, how did you navigate the contracts with?
Yeah, so for a while, I mean, I still read all the contracts on myself and everything. I just think as time progresses, you start slowly seeing what works and what doesn't. I would just read them over and over and over again to see what makes sense. With brand deals and campaigns, you look at the exclusivity, you look at the rate, you look at the payment terms, how long it'll take to receive the payment, whitelisting, all of those things along the brand side. And you just slowly start self-teaching yourself. I would always ask for advice from other content creators that were a lot bigger than me at the time. And if anything, the thing that I really had to learn were my rates for my brand deals, just the financial side of things. But on the legal side, I'm not a lawyer, but I have been able to just kind of nitpick certain things. Like, okay, I think that seems right. That seems right. But now I definitely have been seeking more aid in that, but fortunately, I've just been able to really just read the contracts over and over and over again, I'm not just going to sign something randomly, I'm just going to really read it a couple times, take a few hours out of my day and just make sure it makes sense.
You're probably an educated client too, in partnership working with a law firm or an attorney group. They're going to be excited because you've managed yourself. You've probably learned a few things the hard way. And now you're probably I mean, you have a lot of followers. This is a huge brand that you've created.
Yeah, it is. It's a privilege. I love doing every moment of it. I'm always grateful with everything that was given to me. And I don't know, I just feel like also when you started with 0 followers and just grew that organically, I just feel like that always motivates me in terms of motivating others that, hey, you can do it as well. Like it's not impossible. There wasn't anyone who I would say built me up. There was anyone who like gave me that wealth on those sides of things. Building everything organically is always like something that I love doing, and knowing that I did it, I'm like, okay, if I did it anyone can do it, you know?
No, that's great to hear, Jorge, and very inspiring, that you learn how to manage cash flow in the early stages of your business by being a little productive and frugal, in terms of using the current technology that you had and not overspending. And I'm just curious to know, now that you're a lot bigger, not even a little bigger, but a lot bigger, how do you budget for product development, whether that's marketing and operational costs, while still maintaining a focus on profitability?
Yeah, so with costs and everything, I definitely do set certain budgets for certain videos for the work that I need. Just kind of see what makes sense also on my return. I want to make sure that there will be a return on the investment. But I always just kind of see what makes sense. I don't want to say I don't hold back financially in terms of videos, but whenever it has to do with the business, I'm like, okay, like now I can really fund that project. Now I can really fund that. And you do have a rough idea of, or rough desire on the return on investment. Or for example, if a sponsorship reaches out with a certain budget that they have, it's like, okay, I'm going to make sure to not go over that budget. So I'm going to make sure we stay along those lines. But yeah, I have been very fortunate with my format where it's just talk directly to camera, and I really do film everything indoors. I really don't have to exceed the budgets, which is really nice.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. Go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, that makes me think. I wonder where the crossover is with attorneys and managing talent. I mean, it seems like there could be a little bit of overlap. That would be a question for Patty and David. What do you guys think about that? This is interesting because it's a ton of contracts.
Yeah, it's a great question, Megan. And I as I'm sitting here listening to Jorge, I think about some of the other people out there that we work with, and when you're the initial kind, so your sponsorship agreements are obviously something that's very important to a lot of things. As money's coming in, how they're structured, and you got to really pay attention because a lot of times they'll try to limit or express how you can actually convey both their image but also your image. You get a lot of morality clauses built into things that you got to think about. And if you express something that is, that they feel is against their morals, they won't, they'll potentially pull their support to you. I was just talking to a colleague the other day, and it used to be that he was able to get into all of his because he does a lot of work in the auto racing, and he used to be able to get into all the contracts that the drivers could express their political views without retribution. But that is getting harder and harder to put into the contracts these days, just because of a lot of things going on within the world around us. So, it's something you really got to think about when you're signing them, but when you're reviewing these contracts. That are there going to be limitations on how and what you can do when you're moving forward on these contracts? So,
yes, definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree with David. I think to David's point, we're always looking out for the content creators or the players' best interest, and advise them in what we think it best fits for them in the current situation. And kind of also, as David mentioned earlier, thinking long term, right? We're always thinking bigger. You don't want to get caught signing up with one small company, and that prohibits you from competing with the bigger company in the future. So it's always just looking out for those type of provisions and language in the agreements that we tend to look for. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say the other thing you got to think about as well when you're setting your documents up is, your founders, right? Those initial investors, they usually end up with a better deal often than the people later, and you want to and they'll often ask for protections, anti-dilution provisions, or other things, so that they can actually maintain their interest in the company, which sounds great at the time, but can lead to some real problems later. When you're trying to do a really large, you've become really big, and you have some PE firm, trying to make their investment, and the anti-dilution clause makes it too expensive or unsavory for them to come in and actually help you out. So, little things can mean a lot later. So just be careful.
Yeah, no, I agree, David. And I think that's a good segue into, once you kind of make it really big, you need to assemble your own team, right, Jorge? As you probably know, you want to, start hiring people, create a productive and healthy workplace culture. So if you can tell us a little bit about, whether or not you currently have any employees, And at what point did you realize that you needed to hire someone?
Yeah, definitely. So I do have a team of editors that have been helping me out recently. Um, they've just been helping me just edit pretty much. But with those aspects, with me realizing that, it was let's say like 2 years into creating content where I just felt the amount of time, like I was just kind of, I don't want to say the channel was outgrowing me, but it was just growing way too fast. I was like, okay, I got to keep up. I really have to upscale myself as well. So that was when I had a few people helping me out with the edits. Um, at the same time, it was just, again, really, really fast growth where you just have to keep up. You just have to find ways to really like rapidly produce these videos, or like just make the production of these videos a lot quicker. And that's where I was just kind of, yeah, just hiring editors, just hiring people around me to really help out. Also, like the team around me, such as the tax advisor. And for a while, I did have management to kind of help me out on the brand side of things. But now I have decided to just be self-managed again, just to kind of really just to kind of hit a bit of a reset on my career, just kind of really see where to move forward with that. But yeah, I just think you just start feeling it when you're like, okay, I think I need some help. You probably do, like the minute you start realizing that, I just don't want to be thinking like, oh no, I'm good, because I just feel like I'm also in it for the long run as well with this career, because I feel like with content creation or just online presence in general, the longevity is always at question, I feel. So making sure that you can upscale or just find ways to make sure you stay in the long, like be there for the long run, that's something I always prioritize as well.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And yeah, it sounds like you started off with the manager at some point and later realized that you're better off self-managed. And so I'm just curious to know, David, if you know of any legal issues that, founders should be aware of when hiring employees versus contractors.
Yeah, there's actually there's a whole series of thoughts that have to go into this, because employees, obviously, you're paying tax. They're your employees. You have to have handbooks. You have to have rules, regulations, and a lot of other things in place. And they're somewhat expensive as an employee because of the tax structure and other benefits that go along, depending on what state you're in, with having those employees. Whereas an independent contractor, it's whatever the agreement states. It's the contractual relationship, but you have to be careful because a lot of state laws and the federal government, at least under the current administration, really takes a hard look at the relationship that's actually being founded there between the independent contractor and the company, and is it actually just a employment agreement in disguise? So you have to be very careful when doing these types of things. And obviously, it shouldn't prevent you from entering into an independent contractor agreement, but you may just want to consult again with the council just to make sure that what you're putting in there doesn't make it look or appear more like an employment contract, where if the state or federal government comes in and does an audit, you're going to be subject to fines, penalties, and other things. So it's just something to think about, but it shouldn't prevent you from using independent contractor agreements, because that's typically the way 90% of small businesses start, is through a lot of independent contractors, just because of the expense of employees are so high. A lot of times they're not even paying themselves payroll, so why do they want to pay somebody else a payroll?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, the other part that comes with hiring independent contractors is the fact that you start entering into non-disclosure agreements with them, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how important non-disclosure agreements and non-compete agreements are for early stage startups, and kind of when they should start be using?
Yeah, so and it's so non-disclosure agreements are very important. They're that's the only way you really protect your intellectual property. If you don't have that ahead of time, when they first start talking to somebody, anything you tell them, they can utilize themselves independently without just because you voluntarily provide them the information. So without doing that, you can put yourself in harm's way without really thinking about it. On the non-compete side, they are. There's a whole ball of wax behind those these days. Obviously, non-competes with competitors and things like that, company to company, employees within opposite companies, they work for the most part, as well as non-competes between yourself and your investors, potentially, depending upon, or your key employees, your high-level executives. Most places you can use those types of things. Again, there's a lot of case law out there about this these days as well. And then there's what's going on in California, where non-competes are generally not permitted at all. So you got to really think it through, especially with your employees. Non-competes with employees are difficult. Non-competes with your high-level executives, you can kind of see the ranking as you go through, are a little more enforceable or more enforceable. And then non-competes in a business setting or in the sale of assets, that type of thing, when you go out to the backside of an exit strategy, they're even more enforceable. So no matter what you do, you want to make sure you have them in place because they are protections, even if they're not enforceable. I will say this, they're good to have in place because it makes people think before they do something. So I'm not saying do something that's illegal, but remember, they may have a perfectly legitimate business purpose. Unless the state has prohibited them in a particular area, you should probably think about using them when they're appropriate.
Yeah, no, it sounds like there's a lot of legality that goes behind hiring an employee or an independent contractor. And I'm curious to know, Jorge, like from hearing all the stuff that David has talked about right now in terms of, NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, non-competes, and the difference between an employee and independent contractors, were you aware of all of that, or is it something you're kind of learning as you go?
It is something definitely that I did learn as I was going, because let's say my first employee 2 years ago, he was a friend initially, so he was just kind of helping me out, doing me favors. I would just pay him. I'll be honest, you learn. I was just sending him Venmo transactions, and he just helped me out. That's not good, You start learning that you shouldn't do that. So now, you learn that, and then now it is with my other employees who are independent contractors, because it's not always a consistent basis that we do work. It's just whenever I need their aid. We had to set up agreements with non-disclosures, certain things along those lines, just also like confirming that they are independent contractors where they won't receive employee benefits right this very moment, so just kind of discussing those things. And I was fortunate to have people around me who were kind of advising me, and I would just ask, because also a few of these employees that are not in the US as well, some of the editors, everything is all virtual, so sometimes they are in other countries, so you just have to really, I was just asking so many questions. How do we do this the right way? How to do this the legal way? And also for tax purposes and everything, how do we just make sure it's all good? Pretty much I was just asking it in the most simple way possible.
And that is why Patty and David are here. And I love this conversation because as an association, we're B2B. So we're here to help businesses. Yes. And it just makes me a little nervous because I would wonder, who are you asking? Like, it sounds like it's more like peers. And I'm trying to say to our members, get yourself your attorneys on your legal team from the beginning. Definitely. Because it's not like all these conversations and all these favors. And you'd be surprised. And I'm saying this just because I'm the founder of this association. And what means the most to me is that people get in business or are in business and stay in business and thrive. Absolutely. And I try to find the greatest firms with the greatest attorneys that you want to have at your board meeting, that you want to have at your annual Christmas party, that you want to have as part of your team. And it sounds like you've been really lucky and you've made good judgments. And I love this story because, as you grow and others, you'll see the starter, entrepreneurial starter kit. Like I know I've seen from Archer and Grainer, what you need just to get started. And I know that I'm sure Sal has it as well. When you win our elevator pitch, you get that kit, and it's, you're launched and loaded. So I have to say that because some of the best things that I've ever done in business is help people in business with all the resources that they don't even know that they don't even know. And I'm only saying it because Patty and David can't say how great they are this whole show. I have to say something. And that's my give back in this world is to help people understand what they don't even know. Make your table longer, invite your attorneys. They're your friends. They're your counselors. It's not hours and hours of reading and learning law. Do your thing. Do your business. Let them take that off your shoulders. Head to head, right, David?
I agree. And the only thing I'm going to say, this is the free legal advice. Be careful when you call your independent contractors your employees.
Okay. Definitely. Sounds good.
So
Definitely.
they're your business partners. They're not your
Yes,
employees.
they are.
Okay.
Be careful. I know it sounds funny, and I'm not, but a cautionary tale. How you describe them sometimes is what they become. So
Okay. Definitely. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And Megan, to your point, I think it's very important to join platforms like, the Esports Trade Association, which are, made out of attorneys and entrepreneurs and people, organizations that are looking, to connect with other like-minded individuals. And you start building those relationships and connections. And like you mentioned, you're not just my client and I'm not just your attorney, like we'll be friends and I'll see you at the Christmas party and at Thanksgiving dinner, hopefully, and you build those connections. And to Jorge's point, like once you build a connection and a relationship, it's so much easier to continue working with that person. So it's great to hear, Jorge, that you found, great mentors and advisors to kind of help you, guide you, and build you up and help you to where you are today. But yeah, no. So moving on to, the marketing and branding of Horchata, so how important are partnerships or collaborations with other creators or brands in expanding your business? Can you share a couple of successful collaborations?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I feel like really every advisor has been through a collaboration in some way, shape, or form, where it's a lot of as I was starting, you start seeing other people who are doing similar content as you or just similar ideas, and then you guys just kind of connect, and then sometimes they can be near you or either on the other side of the country, but you just always have that bond because we're all doing something similar. We're all just kind of going at this with just the love of making content, which is something that we can always interact with and always talk about. And as well, I feel like just having that group of just creators and just advisors that everywhere you learn, if they learn something new, they'll tell you. And if I learn something new, I'll tell them as well, and I just think that has all kind of helped us and in the best way possible, in the fortunate way, to really just learn through like the nooks and crannies of this business, because again, it is still fairly new. It's still a very new thing, and especially it was just brand new for us, all of us. We didn't have maybe, for example, like a parent who was a content creator. So certain things like that, we're just all kind of like weaving it all on ourselves. And you do make really good friendships as well. You really make some really long, like lifelong friendships. And as well with other collaborations in terms of, let's say, sponsorships as well, you do gain really strong relationships with those people as well, like the agencies, the people who are in charge of the brand partnerships, and you just really gain those relationships with them as well. And yeah, I feel like that was also a really amazing pivot into my career. Let's say I'll give you a really great example. 3 years ago, when I was like 1 year into doing the content, I was reached out by Hollister, the brand that makes clothes and jeans, and they just wanted me to do, I think it was just 2 sponsored videos for them. So I did them for them, and they loved them. Then they offered me a 1-year deal to just continue making content with them and just do that. And just having that 1 year where I knew I just had a source of steady income from somewhere while making content was really one of those pivots where I was just like, oh, I can quit my job at Walmart and just pursue this full time. And I can take, I guess, more risks on the content side of things, where I will know that I will have at least one steady source of income for 1 year. That's what I kind of told myself. So I could just keep on doing this, and taking those risks and just not being afraid of that really just pushed me into tenfold by the time that contract wrapped up with them, where I just had a bigger following, and then I was able to continue pursuing what I love doing financially as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say 1-year contract, because that's like almost a trial. It's great.
Yeah.
You're not really locked in for long. They're not locked in for long. And though if you're doing what they want, or vice versa, you're not doing, you can get out pretty easily at the end of that term. 1 year's not too bad to be under something first start. I mean, obviously people look for big numbers and they want bigger money. That requires usually a longer commitment a lot of times. And sometimes you want to fill it out, especially when you're starting out and it's the first or second time you're actually signing on with something of that nature. See how it works.
And there's so much of this happening. I have to jump in again. And I'm not just plugging for the association, ours. I'm saying for anybody, join one. Because what associations have is they have a directory of professionals. And you want to, when you get a call like that, you want to hire a firm to help you negotiate that contract, because someone like David or Patty can turn that into a 3-year contract with an out after 1 year. So you have 3 years of creativity, and maybe you can get your team built and help you get a little bit even more, because like, again, like you might not know what you don't know, so a review after 1 year, but a commitment for 3. And, going above and beyond gets you more rewarded. So I did have to share that, because you're not going to find, you're going to find your greatest firms, your greatest attorneys, your greatest professionals in these magazines, in these directories, not your people that are running through, like, am I an attorney? Should I get into esports? No, we're a law firm nationally or internationally. We're in esports. We have all these clients we recommend, and, something isn't right about this contract or that contract, but I'm a big fan of Hollister as well.
Yes.
Yeah, no, to your point, Megan, I think I'm also a big fan of Hollister. Curious to know.
We'll tell you later what Hollister is.
Yes. Is there an age gap here? I don't know. But
no, just a fashion.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, it's an amazing store. But curious to know, Jorge, how did you ensure that your marketing was consistent with the mission and values of Hollister, right? Did you at some point have a setback where you're like, this is not what I believe, I no longer want to do this within that 1 year? Just curious to know how that went.
No, I mean, I was fortunate enough to really understand the brand and what their goals were with our collaboration, and my goals as well, where it's, make it as organic as possible. It's also, I want to make sure that whatever brand I work with will appeal with my audience, I'm not going to advertise an alcohol brand, for example, because I know my audience. I know they're a lot younger. They're not going to drink, and for one, I don't feel like it looks good on me. And also, I don't think I'm going to get the sales that they want as well. So I do have those conversations even before we sign anything, before we even think of moving forward, but that's just how I feel with any brand. I do want to make sure that I can commit this long of a term with them. So yeah, with the deal or with the collaboration that long, even from the beginning, it just always felt right. It always felt like it made sense for my brand and with my audience.
Hey, out of curiosity, Jorge, so the data because a lot of these advertisers want to understand your internal data, right?
Yes.
What do you have? How free are you sharing that data with them? Because it kind of feeds into our next piece here. But I'm just kind of curious, like because you have a lot of data you're able to collect and you have to store about the people that are coming, onto your site and following you, and that's really the information all of those marketers want. So how are you sharing that information with them?
Yeah, so fortunately, with every social media platform, you do get your entire demographics in terms of age range, gender, countries, even cities, depending on the platform. So a lot of brands, even before we continue working or even thinking of a budget or anything financially yet, they really do ask for those for that data first. They always ask for those numbers beforehand, just to make sure that the collaboration makes sense. So I'll send them that over. And they also do ask for other numbers, such as the engagement rate that I get, how my community really appeals, or any previous work that I've done. They always want those numbers as well. So once they see all of that, then they'll just observe that and really make sense and see, oh, this makes sense, or we should definitely work. So yeah, definitely I just kind of put the ball in their court. I'm like, here are the numbers. You guys really just let me know what you are thinking.
Yeah, no, that was a great segue, David. I was thinking just like you were when I heard that his audience is mainly minors. I was like, we have some legal implications here we need to talk about. But curious to know, David, are there any key legal considerations around data privacy for startups, especially for those like Jorge, handling customer information?
Yeah. So, and I will admit personally, this is why I have people in my office that are probably smarter than me about this, because this area is where you get into the most trouble the quickest these days, because data privacy, as you know, is something that we always hear about. You hear about data breaches, information leaks, everything else that happens with the data that you control, as well as how you share that data, which is equally as important. So knowing the demographics of the people that you're collecting the data on is important, as Jorge has stated, for a multitude of reasons, but it also implicates what laws are in place. Are you in California? Are you subject to California's data privacy laws? Are you collecting information from people in the EU, where you're subject to the to the EU's data privacy laws? It's really important to know where you're collecting the data. And usually what we tell our clients is you really want to think about just everybody's in the most restrictive place in the world, because then at least everything else above that is probably going to be okay. But yeah, I mean, knowing who you're collecting data on and is probably the most important thing, and then how you maintain that data really matters. Your cybersecurity settings, everything else you have about how you hold that data matters now. Probably a lot of the times when Jorge's entering into a contract with somebody, they're actually going to ask them, what are your cybersecurity protocols? What do you have in place? What are you doing to protect the data? Because once you share it, what happens? And it's become a whole industry in of itself, for good reason, because it's important, because everything's electronic these days, and your data, well, unfortunately, is not really well protected, and it's none of our faults. It's just the people who want it are much more nefarious than we are. So they'll get it if they want it, but you just got to do your best to prevent them from easily obtaining it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, David. And I know you mentioned, there's different state laws that apply depending on where the person is at. And I think a lot of, for example, content creators, Twitch streamers, and these organizations are playing, they're not just playing in one state, they're playing in different states and different countries, different cities. And I'm just curious to know, how can they stay up to date with the changing laws and regulations that, may impact their industry or operations?
Well, yeah, I'd love to ask Jorge what he does. I mean, we usually recommend that you work with a provider, with a third-party provider who will actually do that for you and try to. And that's what the contracts you enter into is. They're going to maintain all that, and it doesn't have to be a legal firm, because we only advise on that. We don't actually establish or set protocols. We set maybe the parameters by which you need to have the protocols in place, but we don't do that work. So this is a great place where you bring in somebody. I don't know, Jorge, if you've done this already, bring somebody in to help you in this area.
You mind repeating the question, Patty? So what was the?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious to know, how do you stay up to date with the changing laws and regulations in terms of data privacy? We now have AI and ChatGPT, and, how do you stay up to date?
And even like cross-border.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the hardest one, right?
It's gotta be. And his audience is minors, so this is fascinating. There's extra on top of that.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I feel like I mentioned, I feel like every day you just learn something new, and just certain protocols that you do have to be safe with. I mean, obviously, I feel like, again, it may not always be like the best way to look at it, but just like certain intuitions, I'm like, okay, I feel like I really got to be careful with sharing these certain data points. But still, I feel like you mentioned, I feel like I really do have to seek certain guidance with those things and just be very, very careful, because every so often, every day, just laws change and certain things change, and you got to keep up in the moment. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna seek advice.
Well, and I will say, with with the new Congress that's going to be coming in, there's a lot of talk about further rollbacks of some of the internet protections that are out there for the providers. The platform providers, Facebook, Twitch, everybody else. They're going to start rolling back. There's talk about rolling back their protections, and as those protections roll back, those will cascade down to you as well. So, it's something that's going to be changing within the environment, and I think we just need to all be paying attention to it. So we just know what we have to do, and then reach out to professionals that are helping you establish the protocols you need to have in place to at least be in the best position you can be.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as an association leader, in helping the broad businesses with law solutions, is there a budget people can put into place? Like operation. I know, who wants to talk about this? And you're like, thanks, Meg. But man, if there's something that I could express more, it's not only hire your firm, have dinner with your attorneys, have them on text. Say hello, send them a Christmas card, have them be part of your team. But what's the minimum amount of budget for this partnership?
I'd love to answer that with a clean, here it is. It really depends upon. No, it really depends upon your size and what you're doing. The budget that Jorge has may be completely different than what the budget for a different streamer may have, just because of the content that they're actually utilizing, their audience, that where they're trying to reach, the promotions, where they're where geographically they're trying to focus on. It's very hard. I mean, a lot of this rolls back to the actual platforms that you're on, that you're utilizing, and the protections they have in place, because you're piggybacking a lot of times off of their protections. And how they have things, because they're the ones that are really they're the initial aggregator of the content and of the actual data, and then what they're doing is they're disseminating that data to you. And then, because unless you're doing separate data mining behind that, I don't know if you are or you're not. It's the initial data is coming from them, and then the secondary mining happens after that. But that first batch is really what's most important. So my answer to you, Megan, is it's hard to say. I wish I could give you a number. I know Patty would love to give you a number because we might get some phone calls, but I think it's not one size fits all. But I will say that if there's one thing there's a couple things that could really halt you in your tracks in this area. One is having a horrible data breach that destroys your brand, and the other is it's two, and the other would be to not pay your taxes properly, because that can kill you quickly, and the third one would be employment issues. If you stay pretty good on those issues, you'll live and die by your own ability, but those things have real quick ways of taking you out of the business real quick. So I will say that.
Yeah, no, I agree with David. And, I think we've stressed Jorge enough having him on this panel talking about finances to employees and data privacy. And, how do you deal with the stress of managing a business on top of content creation, Jorge? Do you ever feel like you're spread too thin,
Sometimes, yes. Let's say for anything, I feel like just like you're working 24/7 when you are managing your own business. I feel like that's with any business owner in general. I just kind of see it as, I mean, I just do love doing this, like I love every moment of it. If I were like, I would rather stress about this than, stressing about my job at Walmart, so this is just something that I'm very grateful for, where just any challenge that comes in, I would just go into it with like full heart, with like just very motivated to just find a solution. I'm not waking up every day just dreading this, like, oh man, I gotta work. I just see it more as, okay, like the business side and the sponsorship side and the like getting the contractors and also the content creation. That's just the whole beast within itself. That's the main core, let's say, of the business. Just all of those things I just love doing, and sometimes I do feel like sometimes it is a lot to juggle all at once, but I just that's when I do seek for help. That's when I do seek for aid. And also you do take care of your mental well-being and just of you in general, where days off obviously never hurt, so I just take certain days off, just try to really prioritize myself. And like also, there's other things that you want to juggle on the personal side, like family stuff, like all these things as well, that you just want to really devote and dedicate time as well. But I feel like I fortunately have been able to find at least a balance that I'm content with, a balance where I know my limits. I know how much like work and how much mental power this will take. But yeah, I wouldn't want to do anything else at the same time. So yeah.
I have to take my hat off, because I know how hard it is to run a business. But when I'm helping people, you can tell how genuine they are, and you have it sounds like a very genuine heart, that you really are working at this for the right reason. So I have to give you a lot of credit for being the person you are. It sounds like you're doing it for all the good reasons in this world. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think it's great that you're doing something that you love, and that they say you do something that you love, and you don't have to work a day in your life, which is great. And I think the same goes for people alternatives like myself and David. We work with content creators and esport organizations, and for myself, I'm a gamer myself, so I enjoy playing video games, and so working with the people that kind of have the same interests and hobby as me makes my job a lot easier on a day-to-day basis. And also, it's very important for me to look out for their interests and in terms of what's best for them and what works for them. But no, thank you for that kind of feedback. And and how you enjoy doing what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
So any final thoughts or key takeaways? I know we're coming up on time from Jorge or David before we go on our way.
I would definitely love to talk more just about everything that we were discussing, definitely set like a private call, just to discuss more things. I would definitely love to do that.
Yeah, I have to say this has been very enjoyable overall, Patty. Excellent, excellent set of questions, and excellent discussion. I really appreciate it. And Megan, thank you for hosting this. I will say, if anyone takes something away from this, is that it's always worth having the conversation. Even if you find out you're doing everything right, it's better to find out you are than to think you are and find out you're not. So, it's just worth the discussion, that consultation. And even if it takes an hour of your day away, it might give you an hour of peace of mind. That hour of peace of mind at the end is probably worth more than the time you took. So I would highly recommend at least consulting with any professional that you like, whether it be Patty, myself. If you need somebody, Megan, I'm sure Jorge has great people that he could refer you to, but talk to a professional that you trust, and definitely just spend the time, if nothing else, for peace of mind.
Yeah, no, I agree. And thank you, David, for joining us and providing your legal expertise, and Jorge for kind of showing us the ways of, how you go about starting a company, and showing us a different side of, how you went about it. And thank you, Megan, so much for providing the platform where we could host this and give our insight and guidelines on starting a company. So thank you.
Great job, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.